Welcome, everyone, to the YouTube channel of All Saints with Holy Trinity. My name's Wendy. I'm the rector of Ye Parish Church. And over the last few weeks, I've been making a few little videos to try and share something of the style of worship that we have at All Saints and to share a bit of information, particularly about Holy Week, because that is what we are about to enter. So if you, well, I don't know when you'll be watching this, so who knows what may be going on. You may be watching this at Christmas, but this is being recorded the day before Palm Sunday, and Palm Sunday sets up Holy Week. And in fact, this morning I'm fresh back from a rehearsal for the big Passion reading, where we do have the Passion narrative and think about Jesus being crucified and ending up in the tomb. And then we go into Holy Week, and through the ancient liturgies of the church, we enter into all of the drama that unfolds in Holy Week. And I often say to people, it's a little bit like being part of a play or going to a play where you are part of it. But it's a play in 3 parts. Now, I'm going to say the word, but I never know how to pronounce it. It's either the triduum or the tridium. Anyway, 3, basically. I didn't do Latin. I didn't go to that sort of school. So 3 services. The first one is on Maundy Thursday, Good Friday, and then on Holy Saturday, Easter Eve, might be called different things. And each of the services do something slightly different as we go through to Easter and the resurrection. This video, I want to talk to you about Maundy Thursday. So our service will be in the evening, 7:30 this year. And there are 3 kind of key components to it that are sort of a really important part of what we're thinking about. We're going to talk a little bit more deeply about the 3rd part, but just as a brief overview, Maundy Thursday is a retelling of the last meal that Jesus had with his friends, commonly called the Last Supper. So on one level, at the heart of it, it's the institution of the Lord's Supper. We call it communion at All Saints. Other churches call it the Eucharist, might also be called the Mass, depending on what church tradition you're coming from. So there's that idea, yeah, this is the night when Jesus is with his friends and he says, next time I eat and drink with you, we'll be in the kingdom. So there's the Lord's Supper. Just prior to that, though, we centre on the bit that's in the John text. So remember, all the Gospels have a slightly different account of the life of Jesus, lots and lots of overlap, but all focus slightly differently. And John's Gospel is really interesting because John actually doesn't have what's called, if you like, the institution narrative of the Lord's Supper. It's probably another video for another day. But what John's Gospel does have at this particular moment in this last week of the life of Jesus is the washing of the disciples' feet. And I think it's one of the most powerful moments in the whole of the church year. It's always a nightmare trying to persuade people to let a member of the clergy wash your feet. But I would encourage you, please come forward and take part. So it's the bit in the gospel where Jesus, it says he takes off, his outer robe or ties a towel around his waist, something like that. And he washes their feet. And he says, I give you a new commandment. Love one another as I have loved you. And it's rich with symbolism and meaning because, of course, it would be the servant who would wash the feet of visitors to the house. And what does Jesus do? He takes on the role of the servant. And it's really, really powerful. So each year, because we've been blessed with a number of curates and things like that, a different person has washed the feet of those coming through the liturgy. This year, it's my turn. I feel I haven't done it for a few years, and I feel it's right that it's my turn to do it. It's not a full pedicure. So if you are coming and you are going to have your feet washed, perhaps wash them before. That's really nice. But please don't worry. I'll wash any feet. It's symbolic. So take your foot, pour some water on. So that's also really, really cool part of the service. However, there is a 3rd part. So if you've been looking at the notices and things, you may have seen something, and I don't know if this will show up on the screen because I can't get the lighting right. But on Maundy Thursday, it is Holy Communion followed by the Watch. Now, if you cast your mind back to the gospel accounts of this last night and this last meal that Jesus has with his friends, at the end of the meal, Jesus goes to Garden of Gethsemane and is in anguish and prays. And the disciples fall asleep. And Jesus asks them to come and watch with him. So ceremonially, at the end of the communion service, really importantly, we finish with silence, so we don't all go out chatting or anything, but we carry what we might call the sacrament, so the bread that's been blessed at that communion service, and we're going to carry it up to what you might call the high altar in our church. It's sort of the altar that's right at the top by the top window. and have made sometimes it's called a garden of repose. So it'll be decorated, there'll be candles and various shrubbery, best way to describe it. I'm not in charge of that bit, but anyway, so the sacrament will end up there. And then the invitation is to stay and watch and pray with Jesus, again echoing what happens in the gospel. So we're doing things to reenact, to enter in. Now some churches do it for an hour, because Jesus says, can you not even stay awake 1 hour? So when I was a curate at my training parish, we used to finish communion and stay for an hour. Some churches are really hardcore and there's an invitation to stay through the night, or maybe you've been part of a community where they do that, but people come and go during the night. We also have a lovely Anglican middle ground, and there's an invitation to stay till midnight. I don't know why I picked that, probably because it just feels like, it's asking something of us, but it's perhaps a bit more practical, in terms of parish life, because we've all got to do a load of stuff on Good Friday as well. And it's that bit that I want to talk a little bit about more today in this video, the watch. And to help me do that, I'm absolutely delighted to be joined today by the Revd Angela Tarry, and now by the wonder of pressing the gallery button on Zoom, I'm going to reveal her to you. Ta-da! There she is. Angela will be a really familiar face to folks at All Saints, part of the congregation here. Also is the Anglican Chaplain at Loughborough University, but is a rather clever sausage. Clever sausage? I don't mean that. Clever clogs. Where did I get sausage from? I don't know. It's been a long day. And is doing an MA in spirituality is the overarching title, but is researching and doing a dissertation on sleep as a spiritual practice. And this is a night when we're being asked to give up some sleep. We may fall asleep while we're there as well. But Angela has very kindly said she'd come and do this chat with me and talk to me a little bit about sleep. So, Angela, tell me about sleep as a spiritual practice and why we might want to give it up, and whether we should or whether we shouldn't. Take it away.
Thanks, Wendy. Thanks for having me on. So sleep is one of my favorite things to talk about, so I will try and keep it short. But yeah, the idea that sleep is a spiritual practice is something that we don't think about very seriously often, but it has roots that go a long, long way back. But Christians have this really complicated relationship with sleep as well, which I think it's worth talking about a little bit. So very, very early on, the early church tends to decide that sleep is quite a bad thing, often off the back of, Jesus tells off the disciples. It's quite a straightforward thing. Sleep becomes this quite bad thing. There's other bits. I mean, I won't bore you with everything, but sleep becomes this quite negative thing. And so people like Ambrose would say sleep is a barrier to God. So the idea that you would therefore not want to be sleeping too much. You obviously have sloth, which is an excess of sleep. So all of these kinds of things, sleep is a barrier to God, so we shouldn't do too much of it. Now, I don't think that that is the case, but I do think that some of the practices that developed out of that are quite helpful when we're thinking about sleep. So by the time you get to the medieval period, we're in Lent at the minute. It's a time of fasting. Traditionally, we think of fasting with food, but during the medieval period, you also have the idea of fasting from sleep, for example, which is where ideas of sleep deprivation come in. Now, that doesn't mean that you do not sleep at all, because you would literally die. But what it does mean is that you set aside time when you will stay awake and be vigilant and keep watch, which again ties us back into some of the stuff that you have around the watch service on Maundy Thursday. Is that helpful?
That is really helpful. Thank you. And I suppose I hadn't realised that in the history of the church, it had been seen as a bad thing and as a barrier. But I guess that does make sense of some of the practices and some of the monastic practices of kind of praying through the night. There's also, isn't there, a tradition, I guess, of the there's a verse somewhere. It's probably Paul, if in doubt, in the New Testament, it's either Jesus or Paul, but about praying at all times. And I guess Christians at different times have worked out, what does it mean to pray at all times? And one of the ways that manifests in structured ways is to have the pattern of services that all go through all the night. Am I on the right lines there?
Yeah, and yet even in monastic rules, you get the rule of Benedict, which has particular rules about the place of sleep. So even though you might be getting up in the middle of the night to pray, actually sleep is taken really seriously by the monastics, which I think is something that we might have lost a little bit.
Yeah. So if we and again, I'm interested that you pointed out that this is the culmination of Lent as well, of fasting. And I'm going to confess now to the whole world, my Lenten fast has been a disaster. I've failed dismally. So I'm not feeling very, very fasting spiritual. But the discipline of fasting, I think Western Christians, particularly in the more sort of Protestant Reformed Anglican tradition, we don't do it particularly well, or we don't. I'm not sure we have it as much. Do you want to unpack that a little bit for us as well?
I don't know if I can. No, just yeah, but I don't think that sleep deprivation is really seen as a thing that we would do. I think when I say it was done in the medieval period, I mean not to the extent that you get the fasting with food. It's a much lower scale thing, but it is there. And so I think part of that is that if it wasn't really big then, it's not really big now. Yeah. So we just have these kind of small moments, like the Maundy Wednesday, when, you know, the watch and the staying awake is really important. And in the Gospels, there is this word Gregorio in the Greek, and it's not entirely clear if that's stay awake or stay vigilant. And there's this real kind of what are you trying to do? And depending on which Bible translation you look at will depend on whether you're being told to stay awake or to keep watch or to be vigilant. It's yeah.
Oh, and they all have a slightly different connotation, don't they?
Yeah.
Because you could be awake but not watching, or you could be awake but not be vigilant.
Yeah.
So when we enter, you just say Maundy Wednesday, but just to clarify, that was you did. You've had a long day too, possibly not enough sleep. But so when we participate in the Maundy Thursday liturgy, and it runs right through from Palm Sunday all the way through, we do things, in the liturgy being the words, the music, the silence, the action. As we're being invited to stay awake and keep watch, or to be in church and to be present to what is the sacrament, the reserved sacrament from communion, what is it we are doing?
So I'll tell you what we're not doing. This is not Jesus thinks sleep is bad, so we need to stay awake so that Jesus doesn't think that we're awful people and tell us off like he did the disciples. This isn't like can I get one up on the disciples and prove that I'm better than them? That's definitely like not what is going on there. And if you look at when sleep deprivation is taken seriously as a spiritual practice, it's not about me. It's about staying awake, praying for the community, and being really conscious of, the fact that we're connected up wider than just ourselves. So particularly the people in the medieval period who stay awake at night and then inevitably fall asleep during the day because they're tired. But they are staying awake in order to pray for their friends who are going through hard times or the wider community. So that might be somewhere that we go this Maundy Thursday of why are we staying awake? It's not just for ourselves to make us feel good because we can stay awake, but actually using that time well. It's not about staying awake. It's about being vigilant and keeping watch for other people.
Yeah. Thank you. And I'm very glad you said that because, and again, I confess here, one year I did fall asleep at the watch, and and I can't remember who it was, but someone came to wake me up and went, Wendy, it's midnight. Should we do the last reading? I'm like, yes, do the last reading. So an encouragement there. If you want to come to the watch and you're worried you might fall asleep, just fall asleep, because something about being together and being present. And I like what you said, Angela, about it's not about spiritual machoism. It's not about that, but the connectedness with others, I think, is a really important thing. I don't know if this is true or not, but I think I remember reading or hearing the thing about when you get woken up, maybe 2 or 3 in the morning, or there's one of the monastic offices is normally prayed at that time, isn't it? There's a kind of a middle of the night one, and that statistically, a lot of people die at that time if they die like a natural death. I don't know if that's an urban myth or a medical urban myth or not. I don't know. But the idea that when you're awake at that time of night, you might be called to pray for those who are passing from life to death and all those kind of things. There's something, in that. And that sense of being perhaps present to the pain of the world, to others who are awake through no fault of their own, or, in different circumstances and all those kind of things. So when you go to a watch, Angela, do you curl up and sleep? What do you do? How do you enter into this?
So I've always stayed awake, and I kind of love being awake in church when it's kind of dark and candlelit and atmospheric and it's beautiful. And I find it to be a very beautiful place where I can sit and pray and reflect on the readings that we have. And I feel really mixed about it this year because I've been spending so long thinking about sleep and how we engage with sleep positively. And then I'm like, oh, I must stay awake. And I feel really conflicted. So I'm not sure what I'm going to do yet this year. I think my plan is to go and to see how long I stay. But I think it's that thing of, when we are undertaking spiritual practices, you do it in a way that is appropriate to you. So if you have been kept up the night before by a baby who's not been sleeping, do you know what? Maybe Maundy Thursday, you just need a good night's sleep. Yes. But at the same time, there is something about the staying awake with other people and being together in that kind of often very small community where you're aware of other people's presence around you. And yeah, there's something very kind of transcendent in those moments of silence and stillness that you know what is coming the following day.
Yeah.
And yet there is this opportunity just to pause for a few moments or a few hours. And yeah, it's beautiful, I think.
That's the best advert for Maundy Thursday I've ever heard, Angela. Thank you. So that is our invitation to you. Please come and participate with no judgment at all, whether you leave straight at the end, stay for 20 minutes, stay for an hour, stay for 3 hours. But come with us, enter into this beautiful liturgy as we walk with Jesus all the way from the betrayal right up to the tomb and on into resurrection morning. Thank you, Angela, for joining me with that reflection. I'm going to ask if I can have your feet as well, but you don't have to commit either way on the video. So do please come and join us on Maundy Thursday, and I'll do another little video about Good Friday and the Easter Vigil and even Easter Sunday, and maybe the Easter season if I get carried away. But thanks for tuning in, and we wish you all a really blessed Holy Week.